Welcome to the Emily Rassam Show, the podcast that proves parenting, business, and home life can all be juggled, just not always gracefully. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share because laughter and maybe chaos is better when it's spread around. Hello, and welcome to the Emily Rassam Show. I'm your host, Emily, and today I am joined by Sarah Bush of sarahbushartworks.com. She is a mixed media artist, and she also is the publisher of the Teacup, a weekly newsletter. Sarah, please introduce yourself and tell us more about how you got into the art business.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. I'm Sarah Bush. I'm a mixed media artist and a writer. I have a weekly Substack newsletter called the Pink Teacup, and I have been an artist my whole adult life. I got my master's degree in art, and from then on, I did as is the way for most artists, I think, a whole way, all kinds of different things. I had a jewelry line, a stationery line, a clothing line. I worked for other companies where I helped develop like what you call product development and design for personal and home accessories. I worked for companies where I designed at least hundreds of sort of high-end craft projects that other people could make. And now I really focus on my own work. And that's my favorite thing I've ever done, really.
Right. And how did you know, or when did you know, how and when did you know you wanted to be in the art field? Was there a time when you were young, or was there anything that stands out to you that makes you think, wow, that's what I want to do?
You know, my mother was an artist and a little bit frustrated artist, I would say, very talented. And I felt like she kind of pushed me away from getting a degree in it. And as an undergrad, I got an English degree because I also love to write. All my friends were art majors, especially at the beginning when I got to school. And then when I was looking at grad schools, I was thinking, oh, what should I do? Maybe American studies and my hand, it was back when you had to look in a book, not online. So
Right.
I was at the library looking at all these grad schools in this massive book, and my hand flipped the book like, this is what I really want to do. And it flipped it to the art section. And I landed on an art school that had a fiber arts program, which a lot of them don't. And it was such a clear message to me from myself that I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. And so that's what I went and did. And that was a really great decision for me. Nowadays, even so much of in the kind of business world about the arts, like, I don't know, do you recommend to someone that they get a master's degree in fine art? I'm not sure, but it was a really good choice for me. And it actually did help me in my getting different types of jobs and things like that.
Right. I think recommendation wise, you just tell the person what is going to help you do the best job at what you're supposed to do. And that helps you decide a little bit. But, there's no clear cut and dry advice I have ever found.
And it just seems like someone going to grad school now is in a whole other situation than I was in.
Right. Right. It depends on the person, I think. So fiber art, can you tell us a little bit about what fiber art is besides drinking Metamucil? That's the first thing that comes up to me. Like fiber.
The art of drinking Metamucil.
And I know it's not that. It's, fabrics and different types of fibers that you can do.
That's
So
right.
tell us a little bit about this, those of us who are clueless.
Yeah, I studied surface design, and that is printing on fabric or affecting the surface of the fabric. And I also did a lot of what's called wet felting. Felting itself has evolved a lot over the last 30 years. And so it's all weaving, surface design on already woven fabrics, knitting, crocheting, dyeing. Right, like in the last few months, I've been applying rust to silk and linen and
That's
printing like that.
fun.
Yeah, super fun. Super fun.
Do we,
Yeah, and so when I was in grad school, like I made friends with another artist and we started a clothing line together. So I printed all the fabric and then she sewed it. That was like our first little business and we sold to stores. And we made a lot of mistakes, but it kind of drew me in and I liked wholesale.
right. And so I'm thinking, does paper count as fiber if you are printing on paper, or does it
Well,
not? Since
if
it
you were
is
making paper.
technically, okay, if you're making paper, it counts.
Yeah. If you're printing on paper, you're a printmaker. And so like, not that it matters, but if you're in art school, you would be majoring in printmaking.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
And if
helps
you're
clear it
printing
up.
on fabric, you're in the fiber department.
Okay. And then Tell us about the different mediums you're working with now. I know I saw that you were pressing some flowers, which I love, and it looked really beautiful. Tell us a little bit about those.
Sure. What I have evolved doing, like, so when I left grad school and I had that clothing line, then I had a jewelry line, and then I would always be exploring different materials and thinking about things to sell. And so when it came to my own work, like what I tend to do as an artist is I tend to have an idea about something that I want to explore. It's not always true, but it's so then I look at what materials are going to help me do that. And sometimes my ideas can almost be about materials. So for instance, I'll work with one set of materials for a few years, or I might make a body of work of 25 or 30 things with certain materials. So I did that with metal, and I created a whole body of work, and then I really sold most of that work, and then I can like feel in myself like these other ideas start to percolate. So it's almost like I became done with that, and I uh, pressed at least hundreds and hundreds of Queen Anne's lace
I saw those.
because it's a wild flower that presses beautifully. I love the shapes that it makes. And I was so curious to see if I could use the flowers as like what in art you'd call it your mark making tool. So instead of a paintbrush or a pen, could I make expressive marks and could I use these flowers to express a big idea? And I was very also aware that historically or traditionally, pressed flowers that are framed tend to be small. It was sort of a Victorian woman's domestic kind of pastime. And that's very pretty. But I wanted to see if I could increase the scale, like make something that felt more almost monumental or something. So I thought to myself, how could I express an idea like transcendence with these flowers? And I use them to do that, like to gluing them down and then trying to help them float up. So it was probably, that piece is probably about 5 feet tall. So then having them float up the screen, the panel, and then needing to transform them even more. Like then I thought, how do I take this to another level? What am I trying to say? Like, what does that mean to transcend? What is that sort of mysterious quality? So I was painting them like a blue black, and then I was using powdered graphite so they would glow. And I was sort of trying to get this mysterious, dreamy nighttime feeling. Also, in terms of my spiritual beliefs, this series started to develop, but like started calling it Bowing to the Mystery. And that is how I think of all of those. So like when that piece was done, I thought, how can I express abundance with these flowers? And so then I make another piece where I
Right.
try to figure that out. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm laughing because I like to paint random artwork and stick it on my wall. And I made a dancing flamingo one time and I put a bun dance. And that literally made me think of that picture I did once. I like to do like giant vision boards and I paint things and whatever I'm thinking about. So it just made me laugh thinking of my flamingo on the
I
wall.
love that.
And so, how was it when you were doing the large scale art projects as a creative? Because I know that's typically kind of a hard thing to go from enjoying the creative part to making it a lot of work. How was that experience for you as a creative?
Funny that you should ask that. I'm fascinated by scale, like how scale changes everything. Like just
Right.
because you know how to go to the post office and mail a letter, you don't know anything about shipping something in a container. Like
Right.
those are both shipping, but they really have very little to do with each other. Whenever you go up in scale in art, everything changes. The size of your brush, everything changes, and you need to adapt to that. And this particular process, it's so this series rather is so process oriented, and so like I would glue things down very carefully, and I'd weight them down, and then I would have all these weights on a flower, and so I couldn't just keep going because it's like difficult for me to see, and if I kept going, I would get myself into trouble. So I'd have to wait till something dried, lift it off, and it was so actually very laborious and so process oriented that I found that I needed to make other work at that same time that was like the opposite. So I returned to wet felting because wet felting something happens all in one session. It's the opposite in terms of time. And it's so physically big, like you have to use your whole body to fill
Right.
something on the table. So it's a very physical, full body, action oriented fiber process. And so I was trying to look for like a counterweight. And then I also started to like rethink my sketchbook process. I thought, I need a more playful sketchbook process to counterbalance like things that I love to do them, but they might be so process oriented and labor intensive that I just have to kind of constantly be balancing these things.
I like that. And then so tell us a little bit about how you dye fabrics too, because I saw a bunch of fabric that you've been dyeing and what you use to dye the fabric with. Are they natural dyes? Are you purchasing dyes? Can you tell us a little bit about the chemical reactions you're doing with
Sure.
them?
So when I studied fiber art, natural dyes were not the thing. The thing was something called fiber reactive dyes. And it was like this little revolution that the artist or the home dyer could print on fabric and get the same results as a commercial company, like a much bigger industrial or commercial. And that's what fiber reactive dyes do. But they're synthetic. So in the last few years, I started to want to dye some things in indigo. And so I took a little workshop in that. And then I realized, oh, this is a little more complicated than I thought. This is going to take a little more out of like attention from me. I was doing like a show and I thought, oh, I'll bang out a few scars. I'll use indigo. That'll be fun. And then I thought, oh, I'm not banging anything out here. I got to slow down. So I spent a winter making myself a library of color with natural dyes. And I do purchase them mostly. Last year I started to experiment with planting natural dyes in my garden. I live at 7,000 feet in the mountains of New Mexico. And so we have a shorter growing season. So there are some very traditional dyes that are tropical and a little bit harder to really dye. And you also need a big quantity. Like, for instance, there's Japanese indigo is the only indigo that is a temperate climate plant. All the other indigo plants are tropical. So I experimented with growing a few of those and I thought, oh, this plant's a little more rugged than I thought. So now this year I'm planting more. And so it's like a mixture of making my own and buying them because it does take a large quantity of dye.
I'm sure to get a nice deep color, like spilling a cup of tea on something versus soaking it in concentrate would make a big difference.
That's exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right. And depending on the fabric, like I can show you the exact same dye on different fabrics and one of, like a wool where it looks very dark, and then that same amount of dye on maybe a sheer cotton and it looks kind of pink versus a dark red.
Interesting. I never
And I
thought about
nerd out
that.
on that. All
So,
that.
does one have more, like, protein versus, like, starch structure in the fabric, or is there a difference? Like, can you tell me
Yeah, so wool and
some of
silk are
those?
considered protein,
Okay,
and then cotton and linen are plant fibers, and they do behave very differently. It's true. And I would say wool is probably the easiest fabric to dye, and linen might be one of the harder fabrics to dye. Of natural fabrics, you can't really dye a synthetic fabric.
that makes sense because I love linen, and they're usually not very bright colors, and when
You
you think
can, but and also making it even, and that's the tricky part, like when you buy linen clothes or, like, when you're buying clothes and it's just a solid color, like, evenly dyeing all that is a skill.
and you have to, I'm sure, stir it a bunch and, like, change positioning of the fabric a lot, or is
That's
that
right,
how
you
it
have to
works?
constantly hover, and even there, like, a really big part of a successful dye bath is the thing you do right before that, which is scouring, and scouring the fabric means I have a big pot on the stove, like it's 1890 or something, and I'm cleaning the fabric in soap on the stove, and you have to really keep it underneath the water and learning how much fabric to have in the water, like, don't be tempted to stick too much in there
Right?
because then it doesn't move around, and so, like, each one of those things doesn't appear very complicated, but it has all this nuance to do well.
That makes sense. I'm just thinking about this. I'm a recovering science nerd. I used to work in the science industry, so I like all
Well,
those
dyeing would make
detailed
total sense
questions.
to you because then you also have to mourn the fabric, like, The only dye that doesn't require that you use a mordant to help the dye attach to the fabric is indigo, because indigo is like an unusual. I mean, there are a few dyes actually that don't need that, but indigo is almost a unique type of dye. But you do have to then soak it's a very labor intensive process itself. So you scour it, and then you scour your fabric. And if it's cotton or linen, then you soak it in a mordant, and then you also soak it in a tannin, and then you're ready to dye. So you do a lot of steps before you're really ready to dye.
Okay, so I need to ask you about this. Mordant, is this something that like helps break the fabric down a little bit or no?
No, it is actually just helps the dye adhere to
Okay,
the.
and then is the
Almost like the
tannin
tannin is dye. Like I'm spacing out right now. I think it's the tannin lets the dye adhere to the tannin. So the dye's adhering to the tannin, and the tannin's adhering to the mordant.
okay. I'm just thinking,
Or it's vice versa. I actually forget in this
I
moment.
know the tannins add color to things because we have cypress trees here in Florida and they dye all of our water darker brown color when they're around. So you know there are going to be cypress trees when you see the water and they add tannins to the water.
So
That's
some
making me think of
tannins
that.
make a color. They're like oak
Okay.
balls are almost a clear color. And so some tannins have a reddish kind of brown, and some tannins have a yellowish color, and some are clear. And so you choose your tannin as well based on the kind of color you want. Like I have a whole swatch book now of like what I used with each one in kind of a sciencey way
And
where
how
I'm
it
listing.
turned out.
Yes, and so that I can repeat that process.
I like that.
So I can do it again or not, or if I wanna change that, or seeing it how it behaves on the same color on different types of fabric. And then, you might like this, then to broaden your palette, like to get greens, you usually mix things with indigo, and that broadens your palette, but also you mix it with iron, and there's a lot of Victorian terminology in natural dyeing. So they say iron, saddens the fabric. So iron makes these very beautiful grays, it'll make olive greens, it'll
Makes
deeply
sense.
darken a color. Yeah. And even
And
your water in your home is a huge player in how your dye projects turn out.
I
Like,
guess
I
that would
put
make
a lot of
sense.
minerals in my water.
That's fun. Some things you never even think about, like, because I never have dyed fabric unless I accidentally did with my beverage.
Yes, that's right. And how they all interact. So it's like, to me, it's like a really wonderful way of feeling connected to the world, like, and connected to the natural world.
Right.
And I just love that.
And so I'm going to read a quote from your website because you helped bring us to this one. And on your about page, it says that you're obsessed with making work that speaks to the mystery of being alive. What artwork would you say makes you feel that you're working on right now?
Probably almost anything I do is like that's kind of the kind of perspective that underlies most of my work. So like right in the last few months I've been experimenting with using iron on fabric, and iron like rust. So I've collected all these rusty bits, and then I put it on different types of fabric like silk or linen, and there's some little magical thing happening in there in that process that fascinates me. I almost get an almost photographic image sometimes when I lay rust on fabric I've soaked in like a peroxide mixture, and then it receives that. And so it's like I like thinking of myself as kind of partnering with my materials. So like we're working together to make something, and I'm trying to pay as much attention as I can to what the materials are doing, while also thinking about what it is I'm interested in expressing or exploring. And so just the process itself is like an act of intimacy for me.
It makes sense. I like that. It's good. And then how do you extract the rust to use it? Are you like soaking the rusty things in something or how are you getting it off to use it as a dye? How does that
Yeah,
work?
so I'm soaking the fabric, and there's a couple different ways to do that. And so one of the ways is using there's a potato mixture, like a potato water mixture you can make where you soak these potatoes. And then there's also hydrogen peroxide. And then I'll spray. So I'll soak the fabric, and then I'll spray the rusty bits, and I use salt, and then I'll weight them down. And some rusty bits, you just, well, like, you don't always know what they're going to do. really. And so some of them I can make really beautiful textures on the surface of the fabric, and other times I'm literally like getting a super clean, clear print. Yeah. So it's so interesting. What will I have these I have this flue from a wood stove that has writing on it, and it'll have all the letters. You can see all the letters.
It's neat.
Yeah, it's super neat. It's
So it
so
just depends on the type of metal and how long it's been rusty or
yeah,
just
like you
kind of
can't
however
really
it.
like you try to rust the metal first because it might not. So even sometimes you can even wrap your fabric around a tin can, for instance, but certain cans nowadays won't really rust. So you have to test. And so it can't be, it's got to be steel but not stainless steel. I personally like to rust the thing pretty well before I use it. I use some welding wire sometimes I like to get skinny lines on things. I've used cattle panel. And then my husband, he has a big vintage motorcycle collection he works on. So I'll rummage around in his workshop and be like, "Do you need this? I'm going to use it. Do you need this?"
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
You were reminding me and making me think. One time I ran into an antique dealer that told me to age metal to make it look antique by soaking it in yogurt. Have you ever tried that?
Done yogurt, but I can see that. That makes sense because it's sour and it's going to do that chemical.
It takes like the shiny off of things. They told me, and it worked really well.
Yeah, I love it. And I love old things. I love antique things. So all that really. I have this old crib that I took apart, like a really old vintage crib that I'm trying to print on the fabric now.
That's neat. I can't wait to see that. I'm gonna have to keep following your art and go on your blog
Oh, well, thank
or
you.
your newsletter. I'll call it a newsletter.
Yeah, no worries.
And now, so one of the things that I noticed when I was perusing your site was that you make zines, and I have put mine here. And I said, "Oh, let's talk about these because they're really fun to make, and they're little kind of notebooks." I will
Yeah.
have you describe them. This is mine. It's pretty flower colors. And can you tell us about what they are and
Yeah. Like the little history of zines,
a
maybe?
little history would be great.
So zines got really popular in the 80s and they were kind of a punk rocky thing and maybe something that you do at work, like stay late at work and use the company copy machine to print your secret zine for your band or something. And back then people would cut out images out of magazines. Remember magazines? So people would cut out and they might cut out words and they would make zines on like whatever they were really passionate about. And then I feel like in the last few years they've really gotten popular again. And the kind you have is like this kind of. Sometimes I like to make little almost little sketchbooks for myself. And they are from a single piece of paper, this
Yes.
particular zine size. And that's what is fun about it. And so, if you want to just do it as a sketchbook, what I like to do is I'll make marks on a piece of paper and then I fold it. So there's just a particular way to fold a zine that turns it into several little pages. And so sometimes I'll make a blank one that I'll write notes on just so I have something in my purse that I can, my to-do list or whatever. And I love what you did to make a personal zine that's like a personal vision board that you can look at and re-inspire yourself with. Honestly, I think that's a genius idea that I'm going to steal. So I love that. And so I make sketchbooks. I also make political zines. And you can make a zine out of all kinds of things. I was just telling you, I have these cootie catcher shapes things I made when I was 7, and I have turned them into zines for adults. And I want people to play with them. I think that's such an interesting surprise
It
for
is.
to pick that up and maybe learn something they didn't know. This one zine I'm holding is about inspiring women who have made a difference in the
I think
past.
that's fun. And I like how it flaps up. You showed me.
I
You have
know
to
it's
show us this. You have to show us this.
okay.
They're so
So when
cute.
you were
And
7, you might it might have been like the 4 colors, and you would have read BLUE, and then it would have been like numbers, and you'd have been I pick 4 FOUR, and then you'd lift it up and be like, "You're gonna marry Johnny." With these, I put these like inspiring quotes by these women in there.
I like that. It's just, I'm like, I get bored easily. So I just don't like flat sheets of paper, and I won't write on anything with lines. I think it's wrong because I don't want to be constrained. And I've never been a pencil user because I'm like, I don't want to erase it. What if it was important
Oh my God.
that I need to remember this old thing? So I loved that you were printing on the, 3D paper things. They're catching your attention.
Yes, from my little activism point of view, I'm trying to catch people's attention and do something surprising. But like even in my zines where I also make things for my founding members of I send a zine quarterly to the founding members of the Pink Teacup. And so I'll put poetry in and print them. But I also really love, like, these traditional single page zines don't normally get glued. You just fold them and they're a folded up thing that is loose.
Yes,
But
I
I
can
like,
pull mine apart. See, look, like, this is
yes,
how it is. It's just a sheet of paper with a hole in the middle, and that's
yes.
how you make it.
And that's how you can make it fold into this book shape.
And then what about the other size you're telling us about?
So I just was saying that I like to glue them to make them look very finished. But I also think it's a great place. There's something weirdly satisfying about having a little book that you put something into. Like when you have random sheets of paper that you're either drawing on or making lists or vision boards, they haunt you. You're like they don't have a
Right.
place to live. Where they follow you around the house, or so I love it when I can put it like it's done. It's in here. It's a thing.
Mhm.
And I can, you can put it in your purse and read it like you do and remind yourself what matters to you. God, I love that idea. Or when you're just keeping track of things, like you're going to medical appointments, you could have it in anything. Or you could treat it like a sketchbook like I do. And then you make this little space, especially if you're feeling cautious or like if you're not sure what to make and you just make these random marks on a piece of paper and then fold it up, then suddenly parts of these marks. That's how each one of these started. So then I've got marks to respond to on each page, and then I take out markers or paint and add to it. And that's a little something that you can do in front of the television. It's almost like you're solving a smaller problem, solving a smaller art problem. So if like any of your listeners are thinking, I wonder if I could do that. Like it's a good way to let yourself play and explore without these stakes being very high.
Yes, low committal. It's very low committal. I will say that. I wait for magazines to come every month and I cut pictures out. I don't even print them. Like,
Yeah,
or
right.
or advertisement ones, and I go through and I rip the pages out I want and throw the rest away. And then when I
Exactly.
get to it, I cut them out and use my kids' glue stick while they're
I
in
love
bed.
glue sticks. I love glue sticks. No, and I think like actually collaging in them is a really fantastic idea as well, because that can feel lower stakes as well.
Yes, I am a low stakes artist and I will swear by it.
And then also it's like a way, like, oh, you're working on your little thing and you can just tuck it away and hide it if you need to.
Yes, they tuck nicely in books. You can stick it in a book you're reading, and sometimes I'll take notes on it or I'll take it to a conference. And I was going to see if I can kind of bind them together. I recently saw somebody binding things. So I wondered
Oh,
if I
interesting.
could poke tiny holes and tie them together and then put a cover on it. I'm going to try that soon.
So interesting. Yeah. And then
But
it's like
I,
you have a record.
right. But I feel like a regular hole punch would be huge for this
Yeah.
size. So I have to wait until I find something small, like a belt hole punch or something.
You know what you could also use is an awl.
That's true. I don't have one of those.
But you could run into an awl in the same way that you might run into a belt hole punch.
I think I have one of those.
Oh, a belt hole punch. Well, there you go. For someone who's listening, they could have an awl, AWL, and they hold it on the paper and use a little hammer and
Yes.
make a little
I'm
hole.
sure I'll figure something out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And let's see, what else can you tell us about your work? Have we covered all of the different types of art you have done?
Well, I think like right now, I'm really up to my eyeballs in all my fiber art pursuits and thinking about making flags and my own, personal flags, not national
Right.
flags. And and really the other big part of me is the Pink Teacup and writing about what it means to be fully expressed, how our imaginations can save the world, like why it matters to be fully expressed.
Tell us a little bit about it
Well,
so we can know it. And if you want to sign up, I will put the link in as many descriptions as I am allowed. I can't put links in everything yet, so you'll have to reference maybe the Spotify or YouTube video.
Yeah, yeah. So I started writing the Pink Teacup a couple of years ago, and I really didn't know where it was gonna go exactly. And then I was really surprised by what a wonderful creative outlet I found it, and I was really surprised by I really loved how it helps clarify my own thinking. I always write about something that's on my mind. And I publish every Tuesday morning. So starting about Saturday morning, I'll think, what's been on my mind this week? And so I'll often start an essay with what's on my mind. Like last week, I saw a documentary that really hit me hard, so I started to write about it, but I didn't really know where I was going. And it's like the writing shows me that. And then I realize this is really what matters to me about that, and this is why I think it's important. And that particular piece brought me back to the imagination, and I feel like I write a lot about the imagination because I feel like it's an untapped human superpower,
I
and that
agree.
most people are barely, people will tell me, like I used to do creativity coaching, and I'd be in New York City, and people could not tell me fast enough that they weren't creative. It's like were desperate to clarify to me that they weren't creative, like I was gonna trap them in some kinda creativity thing, and I thought, "Okay." And the imagination is a bit like that as well, where people won't be really sure if they have an imagination, but we use our imaginations all day long, and it's like the base level imagination that you're completely taking for granted. Every time you solve a problem, you're using your imagination. Every time you're missing an ingredient and substitute it when you're making dinner, you've used your imagination. But the imagination is so like every single thing in this room and in the room you're sitting in and everything around us started in someone's imagination.
Right.
Everything. Not nature, but everything that is human made, and that is, like we should be more amazed by that and appreciative of that, and even tapping into our own abilities there. Like that really, like on a spiritual level, that really matters to me, that we connect, our imagination as a tool of connecting to the world and a way to connect to others. When you imagine how someone else is feeling,
Right.
when you're being empathetic, you are using your imagination.
And do you think there's a difference between creativity and imagination, or do you think they're the same, or do you think they're different?
You know,
And how would you describe them both since you're kind of a creativity expert and you're passionate about imagination?
I know I almost feel like I actually think that creativity is like the innate nature of the universe. And like we're creative because the universe is creative and we're a microcosm of that creativity. And so we continue to express that. And in a way, I feel like our creativity is maybe I've been thinking about this. I'm going to give myself room to change my mind, but our creativity feels like a subset of our imagination. Like when we use our imaginations to create, I feel like that's the thing that most people think of. Either that
Right.
you're making something up that isn't true, or you're creating, you're being inventive or creative, and that we use our imaginations in that way. And then to me, maybe the imagination has a more expansive role to play. Because
Yes.
even in creativity, like I think art is just one way of being creative. I'm an artist and I create, but there's a million ways to be creative. Like you're a creative entrepreneurial type,
And I
and you're
cook too, so I consider that my art,
and
that's
you're
my art.
raising other humans, and that's very creative. And all
Yeah.
those things are acts of creativity, but our imagination to as I was saying, our empathy is an expression of our imagination. But to me, it's like that very first step. Like it's like the door open. That's the door to imagination as connection. We can imagine how someone else feels, and that's our example of the very first possibilities of imagining as connection.
Right? And then what about imagining as you start thinking about something that might happen in the future, but it never really does? So, like, the kind of not so great part about your imagination when you're worried about something.
Yes, and that is we have all honed our imagination with worry.
Yes.
Worry is an expression of imagination, and we're really good at that one. Most of us are very good at that.
Yes.
And that to me is like, why we almost have to be a little more like if you commit to your imagination and as like a path, I don't know if this is going to sound corny, but a real path to wholeness, then it's like I can't just indulge my fear. I can't just indulge my worry in my imagination and let it run wild. I have to understand my imagination and see what it's doing. Because the other way to imagine into the future is kind of manifesting. So when people talk about manifesting, to me, it's like what you're really talking about is becoming. So you
Right.
don't will things toward you, you become what you want to be. So an athlete might do that by, when an athlete is picturing themselves crossing a finish line with a certain time, and they do that, they're trying to become that. Or when Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. That's exactly like you
Right.
are manifesting that. And I almost feel like it's a nice antidote to our worry and our fear.
That's the good thing about vision boards. And now you know how to take one in your pocket. Yeah,
Yes.
so you can just kinda, like, focus your imagination on something good when you're starting to use your imagination in a negative way.
Yeah, it's almost like the imagination that undisciplined or like unconscious, like it's just going nutty based on maybe learned things or whatever, versus
Right.
like embracing your imagination as a powerful tool of your own that you want to use. And when you make your vision board, you're reminding yourself and you're reminding your imagination what you care about.
I like that. That's very profound. I love that. And let's see, I like to always finish up by asking, are you reading something right now? Or what is your favorite book that you have ever read uh, that you would like to share with us? I always ask for a book recommendation. It can be any topic you like.
Well, I just finished reading All the Light We Cannot See. I thought maybe I was the last person in America to not read that book, but
I
it's
have
a
not
very
read it.
it's very beautifully written.
All
I'm
the light
forgetting
we cannot see. Okay.
yeah, and it's and I think they made it into a movie. And it's about a young blind girl in France at the beginning of World War II and then through World War II, and then a young German orphan boy and their kind of trajectory through that really challenging situation. And it really, sometimes when people use like children, like, the World War II is a very famous example we've all learned about of a really terrible time. But through the eyes of children, you can kind of see this sort of they're unconscious. They're not that aware of it as they're
Right.
growing into it.
Right.
And then they start to suffer the consequences of it. And it helps you, I thought it was a really great example of seeing kind of every point of view.
I look forward to checking it out. I usually read super nerdy things, so I like that. I think I'm gonna read it too.
And
You
it's
sold
very
me on it.
beautifully written. So it's just got beautiful sentence after beautiful sentence. So that's also a nice.
I read a book that you made me think of while we were talking, and it's called Women Heroes of the American Revolution
Wow.
recently, and one of the ladies brought indigo to the US and started cultivating it. So you made me think of that so that we could do our own fiber
Done.
art here and dyeing.
That's right. And also where you are, you probably could grow some tropical indigo.
Well, yes, it's technically tropical in Florida in some section, well, subtropics, but yeah, it's pretty much tropical. And then my other thing I always like to ask is there something that you have on your heart that you always like to share with people that's inspirational or motivational or positive that you feel is central to you that you like to share?
Let me think. I want everyone to believe that they have the power to impact the collective. Like, none of us knows the impact we have. And so I feel like most people nowadays, especially almost in the last 20 years with the internet and social media, you can just feel like you're just some little drop in the bucket and it doesn't matter. You don't have a million followers or something. But I don't think I know that that isn't true and that everything that we do makes a difference. And when we think about the people that have made a difference to us, maybe it helps people realize that maybe they're making a difference to someone else.
Yeah, I like that because, you can even just touch one or two people around you and make a huge difference in their life and they may never even tell you, so you have no idea.
That's right. Or like I think about teachers I've had that when I was a kid that had a massive influence on me.
Right.
And when you're a kid, you don't say.
It's a big responsibility. It really is when you think of it that way, like treating other people well, because you never know when someone needs that or it can make a big impact in their life and change everything for them or the course of their life, like a teacher or
That's right.
etc.
And also, what's funny is like never really knowing what it is that what it is you're going to say. Like I was talking to another newsletter writer who says like she would work on she would write these essays that she thought were like really important and really mattered. And then she would have tossed something off and then meet someone later who said, that thing that you changed my life. And she's like, this thing I tossed off that I thought was nothing changed your life. And then this thing I thought was monumental, maybe, no one responded to it. So we just don't know what that is.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I like that. And I want to thank you for joining me today. It has been such a pleasure. And make sure that you look in the comments section and the description for Sarah's contact information. And I want to thank you for joining me today. It has been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you back. I loved it. And now you have inspired me with the vision board zine. And so I appreciate that too.
Yes, everybody better have one of these in their pocket next time I see them. I'll be checking. Thanks for joining me today on the Emily Rassam Show. If you laughed, learned something, or at least didn't roll your eyes too hard, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, keep the coffee strong, your kids alive, and the dreams big.